Hello.
I don't know why I noticed it that morning. Usually, I didn't give much thought to the little things lying around the house. Her books half open on the couch, a sweater draped over a chair, the smell of her perfume lingering long after she left. But today, something felt off, like the air wasn't moving right, like the house was holding its breath. I had just gotten out of the shower, towel slung over my shoulder, when I saw it sitting on the nightstand. Her phone. She never left it behind. Not once in the 10 years we'd been married had she forgotten it. Not even when we argued and she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. That phone was always an extension of her hand, buzzing with messages from work, friends, and all the things I used to think didn't matter. But today it was here, silent, abandoned. At first I didn't think much of it. I figured she'd come back for it. Maybe realized halfway to work that she'd left it behind and would call me, asking me to bring it. I sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing the towel through my hair, when a thought pushed its way into my mind. Why not just check? I wasn't suspicious, at least not yet. It wasn't like I thought she was hiding something. But there was this itch, this curiosity I couldn't shake. What was she always glued to on that screen? What was so important that she never went anywhere without it? I reached for the phone, fingers brushing against the cold glass, and that's when I saw it. No password. She always had a password. A simple one, but still, it was always there like a barrier between her world and mine. But today, the phone was open, as if it were inviting me to look. My thumb hovered over the screen for a moment before I swiped up, opening her messages. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe nothing at all, but what I found made the room tilt. At first, it was just a name, Eric. My brother. The latest message sat at the top, unread and bold like it was screaming at me. Last night was amazing. I can still feel you. I blinked. Read it again. My stomach dropped, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. There were more messages, each one worse than the last, each one peeling back a layer of what I thought was my life. They had been meeting up for months, sneaking around behind my back, and from the looks of it, they weren't exactly trying to be discreet. I scrolled up, skimming through the messages. Hotel meetups, late-night confessions, and inside jokes I didn't understand but knew had nothing to do with me. My brother, the one who had always been jealous of me, the one who spent years lurking in my shadow, had taken something I thought was untouchable. In her words, God, her words were what hit me the hardest. She wasn't just cheating, she was happy about it. Excited. Like she'd found something with him that I could never give her. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook. And for a moment, I thought I might throw up. But instead, I just sat there, staring at the screen, blaming myself. I should have seen it. I should have noticed the late nights, the way she'd been distant lately, the way Eric had stopped coming around as often, like he was trying to avoid me. How could I have been so blind? Had I been so wrapped up in work, in making sure we had a good life, that I hadn't noticed my own falling apart? A notification popped up at the top of the screen, breaking my trance. Another message from him. Can't wait to see you again tonight. I slammed the phone down on the bed, my breath ragged and heavy. My mind raced, but there was one thing I knew for sure. I wasn't just angry. I was betrayed. And this wasn't the kind of betrayal you walk away from quietly. The front door creaked open downstairs, and I knew she was home. I didn't know what I'd say yet, but one thing was clear. This wasn't going to end the way she expected. I heard the click of her heels on the hardwood floor, each step echoing like a countdown. My breathing was loud in my ears, drowning out every rational thought. The phone was still on the bed beside me, its screen dark now, but the messages burned in my mind. I couldn't unsee them. I didn't even try. Hey, she called from downstairs, her voice light, as if this morning was like any other. I think I forgot my phone. Have you seen it? I didn't answer. My hands clenched into fists, and I felt the sweat pooling in my palms. I stood up, every step toward the bedroom door feeling heavier than the last. When I reached the top of the stairs, I saw her at the bottom, slipping off her coat and tossing her keys into the dish by the door, like she always did. She looked up and smiled. That smile, it used to mean everything to me. Now, it just felt like a weapon, a reminder of how easily she could hide the truth. There you are, she said, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. I was about to call you to check if I left my phone. Silly me. She started toward the stairs, but I didn't move. I stood there, blocking the way, and something in my face must have given me away, because her smile faltered. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft but cautious. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out what I knew, or if I knew anything at all. "You forgot your phone," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. I held it up, the screen facing me, though I wasn't looking at it. I was looking at her. Her eyes flicked to the phone and then back to me, and for a moment, I saw something cross her face. It was quick, too quick for most people to catch, but I knew her. I saw it. Fear. She took a breath, recovering quickly. "Oh, thanks. I must have been rushing this morning." She started to reach for it, but I pulled it back before she could grab it. "I read the messages," I said. 3 words, but they hit her like a punch. Her hand froze midair before slowly dropping back to her side. I watched as her eyes widened, then narrowed, like she was already building a story in her head. "Messages?" she asked, her voice just barely above a whisper. "What messages?" I laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that didn't feel good. It was bitter, sharp, the sound of a man who had just watched his world fall apart. "Don't play dumb, Sarah. I'm talking about the messages between you and Eric." Her face went pale. I could see the gears grinding in her mind, searching for a way out. Denial. That's where she landed. "Eric?" "My God, no," she said, shaking her head as she stepped closer to me. "What are you talking about? He's your brother." "I never." "Don't." I cut her off. "Don't lie to me, not now." I saw everything. The messages. The pictures. The plans. Last night wasn't the first time, was it? She opened her mouth, then closed it, like she didn't know which excuse to pick. Her hands trembled as she tried to touch my arm, but I stepped back. I couldn't let her touch me. Not after knowing where she'd been, who she'd been with. "Please," she whispered. "It's not what you think. I swear." I stared at her, feeling that familiar wave of anger building again, hot and suffocating. "Then what is it, Sarah? If it's not what I think, why don't you tell me exactly what it is?" She looked down at the floor, biting her lip like she always did when she was cornered. It was a mistake," she finally said, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It just—" I cut her off again, my voice rising this time. Don't you dare tell me it just happened. You don't trip and fall into a hotel room with my brother." She flinched like my words physically hurt her, but I didn't care. I wanted them to hurt. I wanted her to feel even a fraction of what I was feeling. "You don't understand," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." "I understand perfectly," I said, the bitterness dripping from every word. "You chose him." She shook her head violently, tears streaming down her cheeks now. "No, I didn't. I didn't choose him. I chose you. I married you. I love you." "Don't say that," I snapped, my voice cracking for the first time. "Don't you dare say you love me." She collapsed onto the bottom step, her shoulders shaking as she cried into her hands. I should have felt something, pity, sadness, even regret, but all I felt was anger. Blinding, consuming anger. I didn't know what to do with it. I couldn't think straight. My world had flipped upside down in a matter of minutes, and now the woman I had loved for a decade was sitting there, crying like she was the victim. I turned away, heading back up the stairs. I couldn't look at her anymore. Not right now. The phone was still clutched in my hand, its weight heavier than it had been before. I tossed it onto the bed, running my hands through my hair as I tried to steady my breathing. Downstairs, her sobs grew quieter, but they didn't stop. I knew she wasn't done. She'd come up with another excuse, another reason why this wasn't her fault. And a part of me was already bracing for it. Because if there was one thing I knew for certain, it was that Sarah wasn't done denying it yet. I paced the bedroom, each step feeling like I was trying to outrun the storm inside me. My mind raced through every conversation, every moment when I should have noticed something was wrong. It was like watching the pieces fall into place, but I hated the picture they were forming. I hated what it said about me, how blind I had been, how easily I had believed the lie we'd been living. I sat on the edge of the bed, elbows resting on my knees, staring at the phone like it was some cursed artifact. I thought about the messages again, the ones where she laughed with him, confided in him, shared parts of herself that were supposed to be mine. My brother, Eric, had been circling like a vulture, waiting for the right moment. And I had given it to him, hadn't I? The self-blame came crashing down like a tidal wave. Maybe I worked too much. Maybe I wasn't attentive enough. I remembered the nights I came home late, exhausted from meetings and deadlines, while she waited up for me on the couch. I thought she understood. I thought we were building a life together. But maybe she had been waiting for something or someone else. How did it come to this? I buried my face in my hands, trying to shut out the noise in my head. Was it something I said or didn't say? Did I push her away without realizing it? The sound of her footsteps snapped me out of it. She was coming up the stairs, her breathing still shaky from crying. I could hear her hesitate outside the bedroom door before it creaked open. She stepped inside, her arms wrapped around herself like she was cold. She looked fragile, vulnerable, like the woman I had promised to protect. For a second, I hated that part of me still wanted to protect her. "Can we talk?" she asked softly, her voice raw from crying. I didn't answer right away. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, but instead I just stared at the floor. "Talk then." She sat down on the chair near the window, wiping at her eyes like she could erase the damage. "I know you're angry. I know you hate me right now. You're right about that," I said, my voice sharp. "But you're not here to tell me you're sorry. Are you? You're here to tell me why it's not your fault." She winced but didn't argue. "I just need you to understand," she whispered. "It didn't start because I wanted to hurt you. It wasn't planned." I scoffed. "It wasn't planned? So what? You accidentally fell into his arms? You accidentally booked hotel rooms? Don't insult me." Her gaze dropped to the floor, and for a moment, I thought she was done. But then she spoke again, her words quieter this time. "It was Eric." I froze. "What do you mean it was Eric?" She shifted in her seat, avoiding my eyes. He came to me first. He was the one who started everything. I didn't know how to stop it." I laughed, an ugly, bitter sound. "You didn't know how to stop it? What? Was he holding you hostage? Don't act like you're some helpless victim here." Her head snapped up, and for the first time since this all began, I saw something fierce in her eyes. "You don't know what it's like," she said, her voice trembling with something between anger and desperation. "You don't know how long I've been lonely. How many nights I went to bed wondering if you'd even notice if I disappeared." I felt like she'd slapped me. I stood up, pacing to the other side of the room just to put some distance between us. "So, this is my fault," I said, my voice cold. "You're blaming me?" "I'm not blaming you," she said quickly. "I'm trying to explain." "Explain what?" "That you had a choice, and you chose him." Tears streamed down her face, but I couldn't feel sympathy. "Not now. Not after everything." "It wasn't that simple," she whispered. "Then make it simple," I shot back. "Tell me why you kept going back to him. Tell me why my own brother was the one you turned to instead of me." She was silent for a moment, and I thought she wouldn't answer. But then she did. "Because he listened," she said softly, like it was a confession. "He made me feel like I wasn't invisible." Invisible. The word hit me like a brick. Was that how she saw herself? A ghost drifting through our marriage while I was too busy chasing promotions and paychecks to notice? I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I had always seen her, but the truth was choking me. Maybe she had felt invisible. Maybe I had let that happen, but that didn't excuse what she did. I turned to face her, my fists clenching at my sides. "So, what now?" I asked. "Are you hoping I'll just forgive you because you felt neglected? Are you hoping I'll ignore the fact that you've been sneaking around with my brother behind my back?" She stood up, her legs shaking like they could barely hold her. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said. "I'm asking you to let me explain everything before you make up your mind." I stared at her, the woman I thought I knew, and I realized something that made my chest ache. This wasn't just about the betrayal. This was about the cracks in our foundation, the ones I had ignored until they split wide open. But even knowing that didn't change what I had seen on that phone. It didn't change the fact that my brother, the one who had envied me for years, had finally found a way to take what I had. I didn't know where this was heading, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I left the bedroom. I needed space, needed air. The walls felt like they were closing in, suffocating me. My feet carried me down the stairs and into the kitchen, where I gripped the edge of the counter and stared at the sink, watching droplets of water cling to the faucet before falling one by one. It felt symbolic in a way, each drop like a moment in my life that I couldn't stop from slipping through my fingers. The betrayal wasn't just in her messages or her lies. It was deeper, rooted in the fact that it was Eric, my brother, the one who had been competing with me since we were kids. I was the golden child, the one who got good grades, the one my parents praised at every family dinner. He hated me for it. I knew that, but I never thought he'd hate me enough to do this. I opened the fridge and pulled out a beer, twisting the cap off and taking a long, bitter swig. My mind replayed the messages again like a movie stuck on repeat, torturing me with every word. Last night was amazing. I can still feel you. I clenched my jaw, nearly crushing the bottle in my grip. How long had this been going on? How many family gatherings had I sat through, laughing and joking with Eric, while he was secretly sleeping with my wife? How many times had they exchanged glances across the room, thinking I was too blind to notice? I wanted to punch something, break something, but the anger wasn't just directed at them. It was also directed at me. For being stupid. For trusting them. The sound of her footsteps coming down the stairs made me tense. I didn't want to see her right now. Didn't want to hear another excuse or another plea for understanding. But she appeared in the doorway anyway, her eyes swollen and red from crying. "Why are you down here?" she asked softly, like she was afraid to set me off. I didn't answer right away. I took another sip of the beer, letting the silence hang between us like a noose. When I finally spoke, my voice was cold. "Did you ever think about what this would do to me? Or was that part of the thrill?" She flinched, hugging her arms around herself like they could shield her from my words. "It wasn't like that," she said. "I never wanted to hurt you. But you did," I shot back. "You hurt me, and you enjoyed it." "I didn't enjoy it," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks again. "It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I let things get out of control, and I—" "Stop," I said, slamming the bottle down on the counter. The sound echoed through the kitchen, and she jumped. "Just stop. I'm tired of hearing how sorry you are. Sorry doesn't fix this." She wiped at her eyes, her breath hitching with every sob. "I don't know how to fix it. I don't know what you want me to say." I laughed bitterly. "You don't get it, do you? There's nothing you can say. You can't undo this." Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the faint sound of traffic outside, but everything else was muted. My mind was a battlefield, torn between rage and the pathetic part of me that still wanted to understand why she did it. Then, like a spark igniting a fire, a thought hit me. Eric. He was the root of this. He had been waiting for his chance, and he took it. Maybe Sarah had been weak, but he had known exactly what he was doing. He had preyed on her vulnerability, used her loneliness against her. And he did it knowing it would destroy me. I couldn't let him get away with it. I turned to face her, my expression hardening. "Did you tell him I found out?" She blinked, confused. "No." "Good," I said. "Don't." She hesitated, then asked cautiously, "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure myself, but one thing was clear. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I couldn't just sit here and let Eric walk away from this without consequences. He had crossed the line, and now it was my turn to do the same. "I'm going to make sure he regrets ever touching you," I finally said, my voice low but filled with conviction. Her eyes widened, and she shook her head. "No, please don't do something you'll regret. He's still your brother." "Not anymore," I said, the words like venom on my tongue. "He gave up that title the moment he betrayed me." She stepped closer, desperation in her voice. "If you go after him, you'll ruin everything. Think about your family, your parents. They'll hate you for this." I met her gaze, unflinching. "I don't care." Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time, she seemed to realize that nothing she said could stop me. I was done listening to her excuses, done letting her control the narrative. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about taking back what little power I had left. I grabbed my jacket from the chair and headed for the door. She followed me, her footsteps frantic. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice breaking. "To see Eric," I said without looking back. Her hand grabbed my arm, but I shook it off. Please don't do this, she begged. I'm sorry. I'll do anything to make it right. Just don't. Stay here, I said firmly. This is between me and him. I opened the door and stepped outside, the cold air hitting my face like a slap. Behind me, she called out one last time, but I didn't turn around. My mind was already set. The path I was on was dark, but I didn't care. I had to confront Eric. I had to see the look on his face when he realized I wasn't the fool he thought I was. And maybe, just maybe, I'd make him feel a fraction of the pain he had caused me. I drove faster than I should have, gripping the steering wheel so tight that my knuckles turned white. The road blurred past me, the houses and streetlights blending together into a haze. My heart was pounding, my mind running wild with images of Eric and Sarah, laughing, touching, betraying me. The rage burned hotter with every mile. By the time I pulled up to Eric's place, my hands were trembling, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the adrenaline, the raw, unfiltered anger that I had been holding back for too long. His car was parked in the driveway, and the lights inside his house glowed through the windows. He was home. Good. I killed the engine, slammed the door behind me, and walked up the path to his front door. My fist hit the wood 3 times, hard enough to shake the frame. I didn't care if I woke the neighbors. I wanted him to know I was here. It took a few seconds before the door opened, and there he was, Eric. My brother. The man who had stabbed me in the back with a smile on his face. Hey, he said, blinking in surprise. What are you? I didn't let him finish. My fist connected with his jaw before he could get another word out. He stumbled back, crashing into the wall, his hand flying to his face. The shock in his eyes was almost satisfying, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. What the hell, man? He shouted, holding his jaw as he straightened up. You know exactly why I'm here, I said, stepping inside and slamming the door shut behind me. Don't pretend you don't. He wiped his mouth, checking for blood, and then looked at me like I was the crazy one. Are you out of your mind? Maybe I am, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You've been sleeping with my wife. My wife, Eric. How long did you think you could get away with it? His face paled, but he recovered quickly, trying to play it cool. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, I snapped, closing the distance between us. I saw the messages. I know everything. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just stared at me, his eyes darting toward the door like he was considering making a run for it. But then something shifted in his expression. The fear faded, replaced by something else. Arrogance. So, you finally figured it out, he said, his voice calmer than it should have been. Took you long enough? My blood boiled. You've been jealous of me your whole life, haven't you? Always trying to one-up me, always waiting for me to screw up. But this is a new low. Even for you? He shrugged, leaning against the wall like he wasn't the least bit concerned. Maybe if you weren't so busy playing the perfect husband, she wouldn't have come to me. I lunged at him, shoving him against the wall so hard that a picture frame fell and shattered on the floor. You think this is a joke? You think you can just take what's mine and get away with it? He laughed bitterly, his breath warm against my face. She wasn't yours anymore, man. You lost her a long time ago. I just picked up the pieces. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't let him see the pain. I couldn't. I tightened my grip on his shirt, my knuckles brushing against his collarbone. You ruined everything, I said through gritted teeth. You destroyed my marriage, my family. He smirked. Maybe your marriage wasn't as perfect as you thought. I shoved him again, and this time, he stumbled, knocking over a lamp that crashed to the floor. He scrambled to his feet, breathing heavily. Go ahead, he said, holding his hands up. Hit me again if it makes you feel better. But it won't change the fact that she came to me willingly. I stood there, my chest heaving, fists clenched at my sides. I wanted to hit him again, to knock that smug look off his face, but something stopped me. It wasn't pity or forgiveness. It was the realization that beating him wouldn't undo the damage. It wouldn't fix what he had broken. You think you've won? Don't you? I said, my voice steady now, cold. You think you've taken something from me? He narrowed his eyes, confused by the sudden change in my tone. What are you talking about? I took a step back, exhaling slowly. You haven't won anything, Eric. You've just proven that you're exactly who I always thought you were, pathetic. A man who can only feel good about himself by stealing from others. His smirk faltered, but I didn't give him a chance to respond. I'm done with both of you, I said, turning toward the door. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. It won't feel as sweet when you realize you've destroyed your own life in the process. I yanked the door open and stepped outside, the cold night air biting at my skin. My breath came out in visible puffs, but I didn't feel the chill. My mind was racing, but this time, it wasn't with anger. It was with clarity. As I walked to my car, I realized something important. I didn't need revenge to make this right. The damage was already done, and Eric would have to live with the consequences. I didn't need to destroy him. He'd do that on his own. And Sarah? I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. Things would never go back to the way they were. I got into the car, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. The drive home felt longer than usual, the road stretching endlessly in front of me. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles stiff from the earlier fight. Eric's words replayed in my head like a broken record. She came to me willingly. I hated him for saying it, hated myself for wondering if it was true. The anger was still there, but underneath it, something else stirred, something I didn't want to name. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for the faint glow of a lamp in the living room. I sat in the car for a moment, letting the engine idle as I tried to gather my thoughts. I wasn't ready to face her again, not after what I had just been through, but I knew I couldn't sit there forever. I turned off the car and stepped out, the cool night air hitting me like a slap. As I walked up to the door, I noticed something strange. Her shoes were still by the door, but her car wasn't in the driveway. She was home, but where could she have gone? Inside, the house was silent, the kind of silence that made you think twice about moving. I checked the kitchen first, then the dining room, but there was no sign of her. My footsteps echoed as I climbed the stairs, heading toward the bedroom. The door was half open, and the dim light from the hallway cast shadows across the walls. I found her sitting on the edge of the bed, her head in her hands. She didn't look up when I entered, didn't flinch when I closed the door behind me. Her shoulders were shaking, but she wasn't crying. Not anymore. It was like she had cried all her tears already and was now stuck in that hollow space where emotions go to die. "Where's your car?" I asked, my voice cutting through the silence. "I parked it down the street," she replied without looking at me. "I didn't want you to see it and think I'd left." I leaned against the doorframe, watching her closely. "Why would I care if you left?" She lifted her head, her eyes swollen and bloodshot. "Because I don't want to leave. Not like this." I crossed my arms, trying to keep my distance emotionally and physically. "You think staying will fix things?" "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "But leaving won't fix them either." Silence fell between us again, thick and suffocating. I wanted to ask her a million questions. Why she did it, how long it had been going on, whether she regretted it. But none of them felt important anymore. What was the point? The damage was done. Eric admitted everything, I said finally, breaking the silence. He didn't even try to deny it. Her body tensed, and she looked away, staring at the floor like it held all the answers she couldn't give me. "Of course he didn't," she muttered. "He's always been proud of the things he ruins." I narrowed my eyes. "You sound bitter." She laughed, but it was a hollow sound, like she didn't have the energy for anything real. "I guess I am." "Why? Isn't this what you wanted?" Her head snapped up, and for the first time, I saw something raw in her eyes, something that looked like regret but ran deeper. "No," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's not what I wanted. It's never been what I wanted." I stepped closer, my anger simmering beneath the surface. "Then why did you do it?" "Why him?" Her lips trembled, and she wiped at her eyes as if she could erase the evidence of her guilt. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said. "I know you don't believe me, but I didn't plan any of this. It spiraled." "That's not an answer," I said sharply. "I deserve the truth." She nodded slowly, as if accepting the weight of what she was about to say. "It started because I was lonely. You were always working, always distracted. I told myself it was okay, that you were doing it for us. But the distance between us kept growing, and I didn't know how to close it. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay quiet and listen. Eric showed up one day when you were working late. she continued, her voice shaking. I wasn't expecting him, but he said he wanted to check on me. At first, I thought it was innocent. I thought he was just being a good brother-in-law. But then he started saying things that made me feel seen. Seen? I repeated bitterly. So, you let him into our beds? No, she said quickly. Not at first. I swear. He was just talking. But he kept coming back, and I didn't know how to stop it. You knew exactly how to stop it, I said. You just didn't want to. She bit her lip, tears streaming down her face again. Maybe you're right. Maybe I was selfish. But I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't think, what? That I'd find out. I snapped. That you could keep this secret forever? No, she whispered. I didn't think it would destroy me too. Her words caught me off guard. For the first time, she didn't sound like she was defending herself. She sounded broken, like the guilt had been eating her alive long before I found out. But that didn't erase what she had done. I don't care if it destroyed you, I said coldly. You destroyed us. You made your choice. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, sniffling. There's something you don't know. I tensed, bracing myself for another blow. What is it now? She hesitated, and for a moment, I thought she wouldn't say it. But then she did. Eric. He threatened to tell you himself if I didn't keep seeing him. The room spun for a moment, her words hitting me harder than I expected. What? He knew I wanted to end it, she said, her voice cracking. I told him it was over, but he wouldn't let it go. He said if I stopped, he'd tell you everything and make sure you hated me forever. I staggered back, the weight of her confession pressing down on me. So, you're saying he blackmailed you? She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm not excusing what I did. I take responsibility for that. But Eric, he didn't just take advantage of me. He made sure I couldn't get out. The anger in me twisted into something darker. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was manipulation, control, and something far more sinister. I stared at her, my mind spinning. I didn't know what to believe anymore. But one thing was clear. I couldn't let this end here. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. Her words echoed in my mind. He made sure I couldn't get out. My anger, once directed solely at her, now had a new target, Eric. He wasn't just a jealous brother. He was something worse. He had used her vulnerability and then trapped her in the mess he created. The betrayal was bigger than I had realized, more calculated. But the question remained, how much of this could I believe? She sat across from me, watching, waiting for me to say something. I could see the guilt and fear on her face, but I couldn't tell if it was genuine or just another attempt to manipulate me. My trust had been shattered, and every word out of her mouth felt like another puzzle piece I couldn't fit. I don't know what to believe anymore, I said finally, my voice hollow. She nodded slowly, as if she had expected that. I know I've lost your trust. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I swear on everything, I wanted to end it. I never wanted this to happen. I stood up, pacing the room. My thoughts raced, a mix of rage and confusion. But one thing was clear. I couldn't let Eric walk away from this unscathed. Whether Sarah was telling the full truth or not didn't matter at this point. He had crossed too many lines. Then an idea hit me. It was risky, but if it worked, it would expose the truth once and for all. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and dialed Eric's number. Sarah gasped, standing up quickly. What are you doing? I'm calling him, I said, holding the phone to my ear. No, please. I silenced her with a glare. The line rang twice before he answered, his voice smug. What do you want now? Haven't you had enough for one night? I need to talk to you, I said, keeping my voice steady. Face to face. He laughed. Why? So you can take another swing at me? No thanks. I'm not here to fight. I want to talk. You owe me that much. There was a pause, and I could practically hear him debating whether or not to come. Finally, he sighed. Fine. Meet me at the park near my place in 30 minutes. I hung up without saying another word. What are you going to do? Sarah asked, panic rising in her voice. I'm going to get the truth, I said, grabbing my jacket. If he really forced you into this, I need to hear it from him. She grabbed my arm, desperation in her eyes. Please don't make things worse. Things can't get any worse, I said, pulling away. Stay here. The park was quiet, the air thick with the chill of the night. I parked my car near the entrance, and walked to the dimly lit pathway, the sound of leaves crunching beneath my boots. Eric was waiting on a bench near the fountain, leaning back like he didn't have a care in the world. When he saw me, he smirked. Back for round two? I didn't sit down. I stood in front of him, towering over him. Why did you do it? He chuckled, shaking his head. Still hung up on that, huh? I told you. She came to me. I'm not talking about that, I said, my voice cold. I'm talking about the threats. The blackmail. His smirk faltered, but only for a second. I don't know what she told you, but she's lying. She said you forced her to keep seeing you, I said, watching him closely. She said you threatened to tell me everything if she stopped. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. And you believe that? I don't know what to believe, I admitted. That's why I'm here. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. For a moment, he looked almost tired, like the weight of his own lies was finally catching up to him. Look, I'm not going to deny that I wanted her. I did. And yeah, I enjoyed knowing that I had something you didn't. But blackmail? Come on. That's not my style. I stared at him, searching for any sign that he was lying. His gaze didn't waver, and that unsettled me. Was Sarah lying to protect herself? Or was Eric just that good at covering his tracks? Why would she lie about it? I asked. He shrugged. Maybe she's trying to shift the blame. Maybe she wants you to forgive her and think I'm the villain. You know how women can be. His casual dismissal made my blood boil. You destroyed my marriage, I said through gritted teeth. And you don't even care? Your marriage was already falling apart, he said, standing up. I just sped up the process. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to hit him again. But something about his calm demeanor didn't sit right with me. If he wasn't lying, then Sarah had been manipulating me all along. But if he was lying, then he had been playing both of us. I needed more. Why did she keep seeing you if she wanted to end it? I pressed. He laughed, the sound cold and bitter. Because she liked it. She liked feeling wanted. Don't let her fool you with the victim act. She's just as guilty as I am. I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me. Was this the truth? Or was it just another layer of lies? Eric leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. The thing is, you'll never know for sure. You'll always wonder if she was telling the truth, if I was lying, or if you were the fool caught in the middle. I took a step back, my mind spinning. He was right. There was no way to know for sure. I could confront Sarah again, press her for more details. But how would I know if she was telling the truth? I could keep digging, keep searching for answers, but the damage was already done. I hope it was worth it, I said finally, turning to leave. Because you've destroyed everything. As I walked away, his voice followed me. Don't forget, you destroyed it too. When I got home, the house was quiet. Sarah was sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. She looked up when I walked in, but I didn't say anything. I sat down across from her, the weight of everything pressing down on me. What did he say? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He denied the blackmail. Said you liked it. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing quietly. He's lying. Maybe, I said. Or maybe you are. She lowered her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm not. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she had been trapped, that she had been manipulated. But the truth was, I didn't know if I ever could. I need time, I said finally. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I'll ever trust you again. She nodded, wiping her tears. I'll wait, as long as it takes. I stood up, heading for the bedroom. As I closed the door behind me, I realized that no matter what the truth was, the betrayal would always be there, lingering like a scar that never fully heals. And maybe, just maybe, I was done trying to fix what was already broken.
Bye.